Okay, so here we are, our last stop in post-classical Asia, Korea and Southeast Asia. Some themes to keep in mind. We'll see the influence of China, both as a culture and then even politically at times in these areas. Also, there's a note sheet attached to Blackboard if you want to use it to take notes as you go. But hopefully this should be a bit of a review. Okay, so let's start with Korea. Here's an arrow, helpfully discussing this. And so I think when we spend a minute looking at the geography, right, we can see how Korea acts as this land bridge for passing culture and trade. Okay, so early history, if we go fairly far back, it was controlled at different times by clans. Eventually, the Han Empire will conquer Korea and will establish a military government. And so from the Chinese, and remember the Han is about the time of the Roman Empire. So from the Chinese, they'll adopt some Chinese writing in character form. Confucianism will also be made known in Korea, and that will last for probably almost to the 20th century. And Buddhism, of course. Here's a statue of Buddha in Korea, and the influence of Chinese poetry. So under the Han, Korea developed into three rival kingdoms, and by the mid-600s, the Silla Kingdom, there you go, defeated the others and then would drive the Chinese out of Korea. And so here's about the time frame here of when Silla was the dominant kingdom in this area, but remember it goes further back than this. And so under the Silla, the Koreans built Buddhist monasteries. They would produce great stone and bronze sculpture. Here's a little stone sculpture. And they also developed a new writing system that allows Koreans to write phonetically. Oops. So the Koryu dynasty will be our next major dynasty here, the dates there. And by the 10th century, the Silla Kingdom had weakened, right, as we, the cycle of all dynasties. And this is about when this man gained control and became the king. And so then he'll name the new dynasty Koryu. Something I think that's kind of interesting from this time, the Korean, or the culture here, they produced these kind of cool Celadon pottery, and so you can see the green glaze making it a little bit unique from Chinese pottery. And there's also they produce thousands of large wooden blocks, much like we saw in the early Tang dynasty, to print Buddhist scriptures. And so in Korea, they have these massive libraries as well of the Buddhist texts. So under the Koryu dynasty, they modeled their government after the Chinese, and so they also implemented the civil service exam. However, this did not allow for the upward mobility for lower classes. Remember, that's also probably a little bit true in China, but theoretically, right, people who were smart could move up by passing the civil service system. And so, as we see in many civilizations at this time, the society under this dynasty was sharply divided between the wealthy landed aristocracy and, of course, the rest of the population. And here's a painting of the Imperial Palace about this time. So I think you can see also then Chinese cultural influences here. And then, of course, nobody's safe from the Mongols. So under the Koryu dynasty, the Mongols invaded. And as they do, they demanded these huge tributes, right, or taxes. And, you know, no big deal, right? Easy to maintain. Right? Not really. So the Mongols stayed there and collected these tributes until the 1360s, which then weakened, of course, the Koryu dynasty. So then the next, and probably, you know, you can see the dates here, probably one of the most major important dynasties in Korean history is the Chosun or Yi dynasty. And so they were the Koryu dynasty, because of their weakened state of not really handling the Mongols, was overthrown by some scholar officials, and then they established this new dynasty, instituted land reforms, and will last until modern times, almost the 20th century. And here's their imperial palace, which I think is in Seoul or near Seoul. Okay, so Southeast Asia. When you hear the term Southeast Asia, we're really talking about this area of the world. So Japan, just to remind you, and Korea up here. And so it consists of two parts. So notice my coordination here with the arrows. So Indochina, and this is the mainland peninsula. Here that borders China and India up here. And then the islands, which include, so today is Indonesia, but at the time, the largest of which was Sumatra, Borneo, Java. And so, unlike maybe what we've been talking about with Japan and Korea, the climate here is warm and humid. And then, of course, like we talked a long time ago about India with the tropical monsoon winds and their importance. So we'll then highlight a couple of key areas within Southeast Asia. Oops, why do I keep doing that? So in this area, we see, like Korea and Japan, the influence of China, but we also then see the influence of India as well. So Indian traders were coming into this area as early as the 1st century AD. You'll see both Hindu and Buddhist influences in their architecture in the temples. Buddhism will gradually replace Hinduism, but you'll still see some of that Hindu influences. And so initially, a lot of the kingdoms that will spring up there will be modeled on Indian political ideas. And so in the language and the art forms, you'll see maybe a closer connection with India than always China. So eventually, their culture will move as well through trade, but China will also try to exert at different times political influence as they try to kind of conquer different areas. And sometimes, like the Mongols, would demand tribute, right, or taxes to so that they can maybe remain independent, but yet connected to China politically. So we're going to start with what is today Cambodia, or the Khmer Empire. And so for centuries it was the main power in this whole region. And by the 800s they had started to conquer their neighboring kingdoms, and it peaked about the 1200s. And so we'll kind of end also with discussing the importance of rice. So they will improve rice cultivation, and that will allow them to become the dominant power. And they will build these elaborate irrigation systems and waterways. And so, unlike maybe other crops, they could go 3 to 4 crops of rice a year. So you can see how much that would be helpful. Probably, well, in my opinion, but also here, one of the coolest things of Cambodia, and which makes Cambodia one of my secret places to visit that I wish I could go to. They built these huge city and temple complexes, and Angkor Wat is probably the most famous, probably because of this, but it's also one of the world's largest religious monuments. And here's kind of this overview of the whole complex. And at first it was dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu, and you can see those elements here, but eventually has become a Buddhist complex. And because it's so awesome, we can't just do it in one slide. So just take a minute and ponder the awesomeness that is Angkor Wat. Google it and look at all these cool pictures. This is why it's awesome. There's lots of these like trees coming over and the roots over the buildings, which I think is awesome. And some Buddhist influence, and then a little Hindu influence. So anyway, feel free to explore Angkor Wat. Okay. So moving right along, we'll come here to Vietnam. It will also be influenced by India, and so here it is, the coast south of China. And so the northern area will come under more influence of China under the Han. And during the Tang Dynasty, however, they were able to break away, and they will become Dai Viet or Nam Viet in 939 CE. So under the Chinese, they will adopt Buddhist religion and their government structure. However, they will retain a lot of their own traditions. For example, women will have more freedom and independence than in, say, a more Confucian China. And so Confucian thoughts don't always rest well with Vietnam, and so they kind of come and go. And here's a cool sculpture of a pagoda, Buddhist influence from about this time period. And so probably the major dynasty here is the Li dynasty, and they'll locate their capital in Hanoi, which is right there. And they will establish, of course, a strong central government, and things that come along with strong governments. And this will be a big influence culturally, even long after the dynasty will fall. And so eventually they'll start to move south to Annam, and they will fight the Cham or the Champa region and the Khmers in Cambodia and drive them out. And so what is today kind of present-day Vietnam will emerge, and they will be dominant power until the French arrive in the 19th century, which you'll discuss next year, and as you can imagine, it does not go well. Okay, so we'll end, of course, with a particular type of rice grown in this region called Champa rice. And why is it so important? Well, because rice is delicious and it feeds people. But it was important because it was quick maturing. It could resist drought, which I'm sure I don't need to tell you how important that is. And you could have these 2 harvests in one growing season. So this allowed the population to expand quickly in Vietnam, again, leading Vietnam then to become kind of the main power there, especially as we move into modern history. And then it was sent to China as a gift during the Song Dynasty. And if you remember, and I know you do, in our video of the Tong and Song, I showed you that really cool picture of the rice cultivation, and so this terraced farming that they used it for. And so this will also then be hugely important to China in the expansion of their population. So there you have it. In the better world, we would spend more time talking about these amazing areas, but this is just a little overview to give you a taste of the importance of Korea and Southeast Asia.